So I got these 5 horns, all of which are non-functioning. As you can see, I've got a couple different types. So I've got these where the diaphragm is exposed. Got 3 of those. And I got 2 with the housing, grill, whatever. And on these ones, I was able to find already, oh, actually, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher this, but Hoch, H-O-C-H, so that is, I believe, low. And I'm pretty sure this one said TF, which I believe is high, or I've got them reversed. It's one or the other. Yeah, sure enough, that one says TF. So that's actually pretty exciting to me. I don't know if you'll be able to see that or not, having a low and a high. So ideally, I'll be able to make both of these work and have both the high and the low horn sound. Ooh, apparently something really big deal is going on outside. Dogs are very excited about something. So just kind of begin tearing into these. This one has most of the screws. Most of the other horns have only a couple of the screws. And if I stole all the screws off of the 3 horns that do not have grills, I would have almost enough screws. So I need to try to locate some more screws. This one's a little tighter. Got a little bit of weather happening outside, and apparently the dogs are really excited about something. So this is the first time I'm opening this up. I believe that the previous owner had also already opened each of these horns. I'm not certain about that, but that was the impression I was given. So I've got this one gasket here. It's a little cruddy in here. Probably clean that up. Got a little bit of rust on this portion, and I forget what it's called. I'm gonna have to go back and kind of look back at the information I found on these. But yeah, I'd like to just clean all this up at the very least. And so I believe my first step is going to be measuring resistance between these 2 points here. So I'm going to do that shortly, but I'm just going to have a good look at it first. Let's measure some resistance. All right. Triple zero. It's a good start. Okay, so between the 2 screws, nothing, wide open. But when I go down to the wiring connector at the end of the wire, right below the screw, then on each side, mind you, then I get triple zeros. At least I did a second ago. Let's try this again. Okay, not so much the wire terminal, but let's see, the side of the screw. Okay, so I can be inside the screw on here or touching the screw, and I'll get connectivity through when I touch this plate underneath what you can actually see, this bar right here. Not so much with the wiring connector nor the screw, but the side of that plate. And so I'm guessing we've just got some cleaning up to do in here. But yeah, that'll be next step. Okay, so I'm learning. And it seems that the lug here that you would connect your wiring to, your positive and your ground, positive 12 volt in this case, connects through like that. And that's this screw right here. Makes sense that it would connect to that when you consider this coil here. And yeah, it's just a little greasy. Maybe that's not an issue. But on the other hand, when I checked the terminal to this wiring connector, I did not get continuity. So I think maybe I need to clean this up, clean up the screw, and then maybe I'll have better connectivity through there, conductivity, whatever. Okay, slightly longer screw on this one, and just all kinds of gunkiness on it. Totally different kind of screw too. It's a bugle head instead of a Philister. And there's that lug. Slightly bent. I'll just straighten that out a little bit before I put it back together. That adjustment screw. Okay, so aside from making sure that you have conductivity, low ohms between these 2 points, there's discussion about how this screw on the back here will sort of adjust, you know, if you're sort of getting a weak pathetic noise, or you know, or you're not getting any at all, or it's, you know, not quite the right noise, you can adjust this screw. And basically all you've got here is just a screw coming up through this threaded plate here on top, and a spring in between the two there. And you know, I don't know enough to tell you exactly what that's doing, but obviously it's an adjustment. And that's gonna, as I understand it, you know, potentially change whether or not it's working at all, as well as kind of what the tone is like. So, I'm not really concerned about maintaining this particular setting here, because may or may not even be working properly anyway. I can, you know, I could count these threads, you know, keep that in mind or whatever, but, you know, I'm just going to set it to make it work when I put it back together anyway. So I think I'm going to take this apart, clean these up real good, and have a better look at it all. So, and this screw, the screwdriver is not wanting to seat properly in there. It's just barely going down in. I understand that they're, you know, supposed to be like filled with wax or something like that. So I think I'm going to grab maybe like an X-Acto knife or something and try to get down in there and just make sure all the stuff is cleared out of it so I can get a good purchase from the screwdriver tip on that. One thing I've learned over the years is to be a little extra cautious when using an X-Acto knife. You think, oh, it's so small, you know, just gonna be careful with it. Man, they slip, they stick into you, and you immediately regret the decision you made when it sticks into you. So yeah, you know, even though it's kind of hard even for me to see, there's definitely some crap down in here, so just try to get all that pulled up and out. Should be able to get my screwdriver to work better.
Oh yeah, there's some crap in there.
Imagine another thing I could do if it was actually wax or whatever would be to apply some heat to it, but I don't want to mess anything else up in the process since it's still connected to everything. And I think this housing is maybe like a Bakelite material. So I'm gonna go with no on applying the heat. Ah, much better. I don't know if you can see, but yeah, we're getting good purchase now. So we'll just spin that on out of there. There's a little bit of maybe even corrosion. Not really so much corrosion, but just this white flaky material that sometimes you'll find on battery post terminals and stuff that isn't exactly corrosion. Got a little bit of rust on this spring and a little bit on that screw, so I'll put those in oh, I forget what the product is that I have. It works pretty good. I can see where I'm guessing previous owner maybe did a little scraping here to try to clean up the contact points perhaps, but yeah, and in here as well. And it kind of looks, I don't know, this, there's I guess it's a fiber, we're just going to call it a washer, kind of a fiber washer that is part of this pivoting here. You've got this pivot point, and this is meant to stay right here. It's got a hole. Try to get that open. There we go. So you open that up and you can see this little tab here that fits over to stay in place, and there's all kinds of nastiness in between the fiber washer and this plate here. So I'm just going to clean all that up real nice with some fine sandpaper, and we'll get it all put back together, and I think we're going to be happy. Clean it up, de-rust, sand stuff away, and I think that's going to take care of us. So got all that fun stuff there already identified. Let's look at this. And chances are really good nothing needs to be done to this part, but I'm gonna take it apart and clean it up anyway. Okay, I'm not getting a good handle on that. I'm gonna grab something else for that. So I could edit out my mistake of trying to turn from this side, but that's not how I roll. Hey, this makes sense. Why not loosen the nut instead? So I got a little PB blaster on there. and put it back in my vise out in the garage, which is nothing to see, and loosened it and brought it back in. So I've got this sort of kind of cup-shaped washer here that comes off directly below the nut. And then we've got this sort of rubber grommet, if you will, ish. See if this wants to thread off. Trying to do the least amount of damage to that rubber as possible. And yeah, threading it off seems to be working. All right, so go ahead, I'll just edit you out. All right, so that has worked. And it's got a flat spot on the bottom. It has all this shape up here on the top, which goes underneath that cup-shaped washer. Fits down in there nicely. Pull this dude off, and then we have that guy there pointing up, and the underside of it looking like that. It's kind of a dome shape a little bit. And then we have not one, but two, actually, not two, but four. Four washers. Four washers. Brass in color. And then we've got this piece here that I'm going to clean up, make it look nice again. Because why not? You know, a little rough around the edges the way they left it from the factory, which I'm sure doesn't affect its performance in any way. I might clean that up a little bit just because, as long as they're in there doing stuff. Not the kind of thing they would have done in the factory. They're not going to pay you to do that when you're an assembly line worker. So we've got one more brass washer. Should count it before I say it because I was wrong last time. And then we've got a thicker, what also appears to be brass washer. Thicker. And then you've just got this and this screw. So we'll just clean all this up, put it back together. I think I'll probably clean these terminals a little bit and see if I'm getting good connectivity between those. All right, so all right, if I push in good and hard enough, I'm getting my all zeros, but if you just kind of touch them, nothing. So once I start to penetrate whatever crap is on them, then I start to get connectivity. So these definitely need to be cleaned. Honestly, I could probably just get away with doing that and everything would be fine, but we're gonna go ahead and clean everything up real good instead. So I've taken a bit of 220 grit sandpaper and just kind of dusted the top of these two wiring connectors here. And as you can see, I've got my bolt-on meter here, and I believe that you're going to see triple zeros. I'm going to just trust that you're seeing triple zeros with barely any pressure at all from these leads. So I've got that ready, and I've cleaned the other parts, various washers and such. And I've also taken, let's see, that one needs a little bit more. You might be able to kind of see that the spade is slightly tweaked, not quite perfectly perpendicular to the surface that it extends from. So we're just gonna try to straighten that out a little bit better, very gently. Yeah, I think that's a lot better. Mind you, it wasn't awful to begin with, but you know, every little bit counts. That one could use a little bit of help too. Perfect. So, got those ready. Everything's gonna make good contact. You know, it's cleaned up enough. You look at that and, you know, it doesn't look beautiful and perfect. I didn't go insane, you know, just trying to get everything mirror finish again. I did put a little bit of effort into cleaning up these pieces here on my surface plate with some sandpaper. They're not perfect. You know, maybe one day, you know, when I've got more time and, you know, fewer things to work on, I'd take it apart, make it look better. This is never going to be seen again until I take it apart. So I'm not that concerned. I'm primarily wanting to get it back together and make sure that it is going to work as I believe it is going to work. So that's next. All right, got everything laid out here. Start with our screw, smaller of these steel plates. The fat brass washer, followed by the single thin brass washer, followed by the larger plate. And I believe there's a little bit of a, I don't want to call it a chamfer, but it's not flat across on the edge here. It's just slightly tapered at the edge. I think that was pointing up. I don't know that it really matters. There are a couple of lines sort of stamped, these sort of little channels stamped into the, and I'm pretty sure that was pointing up. Again, I don't think it actually matters, but I'm going to point that up. Maybe it does matter. And then we had 4 brass washers. And then this crazy dude here that's kind of like a hollow washer. If you're hearing odd sounds in the background that are not me, it's my dogs playing with a ball or whatever other toy they might have right now. All right, so we've got all that. And then we get this guy, so come along nicely like that. Get our rubber washer, if you will, in here. And I know that I can just like push it down, but I'm just being a little ridiculous about not wanting to like tear up the rubber at all with the threads. And then that cap, and then our nut. And I will, and I probably should have paid attention. You know, I know that these want to be lined up like this, but as far as the hole placement, I don't know for sure. I believe that these sit down in something like this, and I can verify that on the other horn that I have before I put this back together. That'll be a good idea to make sure that my holes line up and that this winds up oriented in this cavity here properly when I put it back together. So I'm going to check that before I continue, but that's basically our process. Once I get that figured out and I get this clocked properly, then I'll tighten down the nut here. Again, it's not as beautiful as it could be. Maybe one day I'll come back and just like make all of the internals gorgeous, but just not that concerned. I want to verify that it works. As you can see, I did get the rust off of everything. This had a bit of rust at one end. The screws are cleaned up, whatever. But I think that I'll be able to, once I verify clocking on this, be able to put this all back together. The points here, I did already check those. I'll show again here how they work, and I should be good. All right, so I verified the clocking orientation with my other horn, and sure enough, I want a 12 o'clock hole, which I have, so that it can fit in like that. And right in here is where my points system is going to go. So let's check the point system because that's kind of interesting. So I forget what the numbers were, but I checked this yesterday. And so, these two pieces of metal, this one here and this one here, are separated by this pivot point here, and you got the fiber washer in between. And so they're not actually touching one another directly, but there is some continuity between them. So what are you seeing there? Oh, you're seeing nothing. Let's see. I had continuity yesterday. At least I thought I did. Okay, so now that I have this piece back into the orientation where it belongs, with these points meeting up in this center hole here of this fiber washer, once they're in place like that, we get a nice 000 for our continuity, proving that that will make a connection. So let's go ahead and install that. And basically we take our long bolt, quick rant, that's a bolt, that's a screw. Unthreaded shaft, bolt. Threads all the way to the head, screw. Okay, quick rant over. So we put our adjusting screw in that hole there. Come around to this side, put our spring in place. And we thread up into the long arm of our points system here. Go ahead and grab my Phillips head. It's got a little bit of pressure on it. go ahead and install this lug. Into here. This is where we use our Philister head screw. Get that nice and tight, not overly, just good and tight. Then we'll use our bugle-headed screw for this side. Quick point of clarification and a correction to the way I started this. So that all remains the same, but this orientation is important to have right. So I've got this shorter piece of metal here facing the camera, longer piece now facing the camera. This longer piece needs to be up, leaving that down when we install. So just like that. Okay. And I'll bring this around over to here. And I don't know if you'll be able to see, but you know, naturally it wants to sit up here at this height, which is considerably higher than where it's going to go down to meet up with this hole here that it needs to go into. So we're just going to force it into place, which isn't a great deal of force, but it is force. And let's see here. Kind of seems like the orientation of these lugs is maybe important. Yeah, kind of, yeah. So that spade is offset just slightly from center. And so I'm making sure that the offset is that direction, which kind of keeps it in the center of the hole, as opposed to flipping it around this way, which puts it very much off center. So flip it back around. All right, now I'm gonna get this long bugle-headed screw without the added hair and run it through this hole here. Oh, see. Trying to get all tricky there. Let's see, that's the way that needs to go. Trying to make sure you're actually seeing me turn the screw, because there's not a whole lot of excitement to be had in this video, so I need to, you know, get it where I can there. Ooh, look at that. I can see him turning the screw. All right, so that connection is made. I'm just gonna tighten that down a little bit more. Perfect. So now that's all in position. Adjustments to this will be made once I've buttoned everything back up. All right, now that we've got that back together, we'll just verify we have continuity, and you should see triple zeros. So, exact opposite of the condition when we opened it up. We now have continuity from those 2 points. So I was editing this video when I realized that I needed to break in and share some information that I realized I didn't really cover in the initial videos, which is the operation of the points. This is obviously not the same horn that I used in a majority of the video. You did see it early on. Slightly different style, same function. So here's our diaphragm, much smaller metal plate than the two thick metal plates that the other ones have. But the function is the same. You've got your coil here, and the points look a little bit different, but what they do is the same thing. And you'll see this part here is, you know, sort of fixed at both ends. very much like the other one was. And it's maybe a little bit harder to see, but right here in between the coil and this upper part here, there's this little tab sticking out, and that tab, it gets pushed down on by this metal plate. So when the coil is energized and turns into an electromagnet and pulls down on this plate, the edge of the plate is in line to push down on this tab, and when it does that, it breaks continuity between the 2 points here, thus breaking the electromagnet and pulling the energization, that's an interesting word, pulling the electricity from the coil. And then, you know, this is obviously going to spring back up because you've got this fairly rigid metal diaphragm here that wants to return to its original shape. So it pulls that back up, and then the points make contact again, energy flows through the coil again, and it repeats. And so it's just, you know, basically like a vibrator, causing the reaction to happen again and again and again and again, as long as you're, you know, putting 12 volts to the coil, assuming you have a 12-volt horn. So that is the basic operation. Hopefully that's clear enough. All right, back to the regularly scheduled program. All right, I've just finished degreasing and rinsing and drying this original gasket here. So it's time to put it back into production, because I'm really not sure where one would go about finding a replacement. Line up my holes, make sure that this is oriented properly. Of course that happened. There we go. All right, it's all back together, ready for testing. All right, after a little bit of adjustment, now this assembly is from my other horn. And as you can see, this bar is not perfectly parallel with this bar. And so it is important that you clock this properly and that this stays parallel with the bar underneath it. So make sure you don't make that mistake when you're putting it back together. Okay, so now that we've put it back together, see we have continuity there, triple zeros. And so what I'm going to do is just adjust this screw here until we lose that. There we go. And then we'll just go right back to where we're just barely making continuity. And so now the electricity, when energized, will flow through the coil and cause the reaction. There will be some more adjustment to be made with this adjustment screw, but right now it will at least energize the coil, and that's what we're looking for initially. So now all we've got to do is adjust the points to get the quality of audio that we're looking for. And I just have this like ridiculous setup going on here. We'll just see what we get. Hey, that works. So actually doesn't sound half bad either, but I'm just going to flip this on and just kind of tweak the adjustment screw a little bit here and wait until we get exactly what we want. Pretty good. Now mind you, this is really just for demonstration purposes because I am just going to take this thing apart and clean it up real good and put it back together. But it did just kind of prove to me that all I really needed to do was do a little bit of cleanup where I was not getting good continuity through some metal contact points, and then really just adjust the points properly. So there's that verification. I'll go through the same process with this horn that I did with the other horn and get them all put back together, and at some point here I'll be able to put them on the car and enjoy having both the high and low tones.
Well, there you have it. Don't throw away that broken horn until you give a go at fixing it. I hope you enjoyed the video, or at least got something useful from it. Feel free to share your own experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.